This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credits scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Wow, it is hard to believe we're back at this already. What felt like needed to be a longer break was not a break at all. And here we are, Richard. We're back. We're back here for Film Franchise Fortnights.
Yeah.
Mere 2 weeks after dropping the Barbie episode. That was
fortnight.
2 weeks ago. That was 2 weeks ago we dropped that. And it's still very much part of my life. She's all I think about.
This is a substantially shorter, as I'm sure you've seen by the runtime of this episode. This will be a substantially shorter episode, and we're talking about substantially less films, which is why.
Imagine if we committed now as our new format going forward was to no matter how many films, but we talk about them for 18 hours, no matter what the films are.
Well, I think 20 to 30 minutes per film is a good rule of thumb.
Yeah. Well, of course.
Which is what we based Barbie on.
Yeah.
But today we are here to talk about the Get series, which is two films, also known as the Oldest Snow franchise.
Is it known as that?
Well, that's what it was suggested as to us.
I don't think this franchise has a name. I think it's just two movie
Forgetting
titles.
Sarah Marshall and Get Him to the Greek.
This is, of course, Film Franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast.
Yeah, and I'm of course Richard,
and I am surprisingly, maybe not expectedly, AJ. If you've joined us from the Barbie episode, thank you for sticking around. Yes, our episodes aren't always going to be. I just fucking thumped my microphone. It's a very professionally run situation. Yeah, our episodes aren't always going to be that long, and we aren't always going to talk about the same types of films. Sometimes we get to talk about films that we like, Richard, not films that we get Stockholm Syndrome for because there's so many in the series, and start telling ourselves we like them, only for 2 weeks later to then catch a brief glimpse of the 17th film in the series and be like, did I think that was good?
Yeah, that genuinely happened to me. When there was an argument on our Discord about some of the films, and I went back and revisited one of the ones that I enjoyed, and I was like, this animation is garbage, the song is terrible, and it was genuinely I think on the Discord it was like, oh haha, but this was actually like my world coming crumbling down.
Yeah, you were on that episode, you were throwing around comparisons to Pixar, to DreamWorks, to some very top of the industry animation. Not necessarily directly comparison. Not necessarily
a lot of my
comparisons
were,
but
this is real bad compared to these good films, which I stand by.
Yeah, I mean, in general, that's how I would describe Barbie. By and large, I think. But hey, it's forever changed our lives, and despite the fact that this is the second episode of the podcast to come out since the Barbie episode, we're still full in marketing mode for the Barbie episode.
Yeah, I've had a few people say to me, I tried listening to your Barbie podcast and I got half an hour in and you hadn't started talking about Barbie yet.
Who are these people?
And
your
now,
grandparents?
Those same people are going to say, I started listening to your Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Get Him to the Greek, the Get series podcast, and you got 5 minutes in before you actually started talking about the films.
That's true.
So, of course, the first film, I'm going to get in there just before 5 minutes. The first film we're talking about is Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Came out in 2008, directed by Nicholas Stoller. And what is this about, AJ?
Forgetting Sarah Marshall is about a man named Peter Breder, played by Jason Segel, who is dating a woman named Sarah Marshall, played by Kristen Bell. And Sarah Marshall is the one of the leads on a CSI type TV show, procedural cop drama called Crime Scene, Scene of the Crime. And so she's sort of a rising talent. She's I never get the impression she's like world famous, but like pretty famous, you know?
No, I get the impression she's pretty famous. Like,
but no, she's not like Jennifer Lawrence famous. She's like
Jennifer Love Hewitt famous.
Yeah. And Peter is the guy who does the composing for the show.
Mm-hmm.
One day she comes to him and she breaks up with him and tells him that she's seeing someone else, and he's heartbroken, and in an attempt to move on and get over her, he goes on a trip. He goes on a holiday by himself to Hawaii, only to discover to his shock horror that Sarah Marshall is also there with her new boyfriend, who is genuinely world famous, Aldous Snow, played by
Russell
what's
Brand.
his name? Russell Brand, who's a world famous pop star. I sort of get the vibe, like he always reminded me a little bit of like Robbie Williams, if more people knew who Robbie Williams was.
That's such a weird comparison.
Why?
And he's British, I'll give you that.
Cheeky British people with kind of promiscuous visages.
Proclivities.
Proclivities, great word. And what's it called? Provocative music. There's very provocative music.
Yeah.
That's where I get the Robbie Williams stuff from.
Right, okay, yeah.
What's a better example?
I guess like the Gallaghers. They're mentioned in the film, but I would say he's more supposed to be a rock star than a pop star.
Sure. Anyway, so the film mostly takes place in Hawaii, with Peter meeting countless very well-developed side characters, while he also deals with getting over Sarah Marshall while she's being taken to sexual ecstasy every night by a rock star. And during this time, he also begins a relationship with Rachel, who is a clerk that works at the hotel, played by Mila Kunis, and it's sort of about them developing their romance while Peter also sort of discovers who he is, what's important, and what
and
what he
learns
really
to
wants to do
forget
with his life.
Sarah Marshall.
Yeah.
In cinemas.
Yeah. So I don't know, how do we talk about this movie? There's something neither of us have mentioned yet. I don't know if we want to mention it right now or if we want to mention it.
So yeah, that's worth pointing out. Jason Segel does hang dong in this film. You do see his penis.
That's not what I meant, but it's very funny
in the film.
I was going to say that you and I both really, really love this movie. This is a very special.
This
movie.
is genuinely one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah,
I'd say so as well too. Yeah, This is it's a movie I've seen many times, and I remember the first time I saw it. I remember sort of figuring out that I really liked it. Do we want to do this now, or do we want to do the housekeeping first? So I saw this movie for the first time. It would have been in 2008 when it came out. And it was, I think my parents were away. And me and my brother threw a party, and me and my brother didn't do that together very often. Like we only lived together as teenagers for a sort of a short period of time anyway. And we'd never done like the parents are out of town, let's all get drunk with each other. It was one of the first times I remember drinking alcohol. It was
15-year-old age, eh?
Yeah, I remember seeing my friend, who was the same age as me, after he'd given my brother money for alcohol, and then sitting at the picnic table and seeing my friend, when my brother arrived with alcohol, reach across the table to grab one of the drinks, which was rightfully his, and me slapping his arm and going like, no, you're not... Yeah, but he was allowed it. I just assumed we weren't allowed any of the alcohol. Anyway, as the night sort of petered down, someone had Forgetting Sarah Marshall on DVD. Petered, yes. And it was put on
started
the
to
television
peter up
while people maybe half watched it. And I think I saw half the movie first, and then it got turned off for whatever reason, and then a couple of days later I must have watched half the movie again, and both me and my brother really loved it. And I remember I bought an ex-rental copy from the local VHS rental store, the local United Video. I watched it countless times over the years. I really, really enjoyed this movie, and that was significant to me because this is sort of in the Judd Apatow gang kind of.
It's Apatow adjacent.
Yeah, and I in high school I really didn't like Judd Apatow. I didn't like Knocked Up. I didn't like Superbad. I like Superbad fine now, but when I was a teenager I didn't. And I remember being so shocked that I'd like been completely and utterly won over by this gross sex comedy, which by the way is explicit. This is a hard movie to show people. This is a very, very like the sexuality is so front and center of the film. And it's I feel like it's the best comedy I've ever seen where sex is featured as heavily as it is. Because something like American Pie, where the sex is featured pretty heavily, it's also like it's kind of making up for the shortcomings of the plot. Whereas I have such an emotional connection.
You put on American Pie for the sex.
Thank you. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. I just feel so emotionally connected to this film. I've always been so enamored by its story and its message. And watching it again this time, one of the things
because we watched it together
by,
is also worth pointing out.
Yeah,
we were on a lads' weekend. We took Wellington and we watched this on not Saturday night because we were at a wedding on Saturday night, but on it must have been Friday night.
I don't know if we took Wellington, dude, but we definitely took Martinborough, which if you're a New Zealand local, that's a very funny thing to say. But if you're not, you probably won't get why that's so funny. So we watched it together, and like one thing that struck me this time was it struck me as like a writer, is like how many fucking characters are in this movie. There's so many characters in this movie, and they're all developed. A lot of them have their own story arcs that play out in the background, and they're all extremely three-dimensional.
Yeah, well, including the love quadrangle at the center of it, of Mila Kunis, Russell Brand, Jason Segel, and Kristen Bell, with their respective character names. They're all really well fleshed out characters, and while one of them has been cheating on another one for a year, and so this character hates that character for this reason, and then these two are jealous of each other. It actually is quite hard to pick sides.
There's no straw man in the film. Yeah. The closest straw man is Sarah Marshall, and even she is like, I don't know, I don't completely hate her. I feel sorry for her.
You could watch this film and leave it siding with Sarah, I think.
Yeah.
There's a certain type of person that would watch this, because there's the scene where she essentially tells him everything that was wrong in their relationship, and I think that if you were really sided with her in that scene, it would probably make the rest of the movie quite a hard watch for you.
Well, it's humanizing. It's so humanizing. And we will be talking spoilers, and if you haven't seen this, like, I really do recommend watching it. Watch it with the right crowd. Don't watch it with someone who will think you're being horny by showing them a movie where you see dong within the first few seconds, and a real, not necessarily explicit, but real intimate blowjob scene towards the end. Like, I always thought that the way it was filmed looked so like off-puttingly organic and real. Which I'll talk about that now, actually, is that the sort of after Peter has kind of his character breakthrough, Sarah Marshall and Aldous Snow break up, and so Sarah essentially tells Peter to come to her room, where he tries to comfort her, and she sort of tries to win him back, and performs 10 to 15 seconds of oral sex on him, as they say in the film, which he then rejects and says there's nothing. She's like, what's wrong with, because he can't get a boner, and she's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, there's nothing wrong with me, maybe I just don't want to see your fucking face again. And then he immediately goes and tells Rachel Rachel gets real mad at him, tells him he should leave, he shouldn't be with anyone right now, and he goes away, and presumably a year or so later, Rachel goes and sees his puppet show that he's been talking about the whole movie. And what I like about this ending, Richard, is like, we've talked a couple of times, I think, before about how both of us kind of, we really don't like it when a protagonist in a movie cheats on their love interest or whatever. For me, it can be a very hard thing to get over, and I think too many movies assume audiences are going to be okay with the character they're supposed to be investing in cheating on their wife or whatever. But what I think changes that for me here is the fact that, as we said, the characters are so fleshed out. They're so fleshed out. They're so real. Peter especially is such a real person with like wants and desires and interests that are very specific to him as a character.
Yeah.
And you understand where he's coming from. You understand his sadness. And so when he submits to Sarah wanting to get back with him, you're kind of like, yeah, I get it. And then also he immediately tells Rachel.
Yeah, it's presented as a moment of weakness rather than a moment of horniness.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason I don't like infidelity in so many comedies is because of the whole like not telling the person aspect as well. But he immediately goes and owns up to it. And then the movie has what I think is a very powerful message, because this is a breakup movie, right? Like essentially
it's an anti-rom-com.
It's a subgenre of rom-com, a breakup movie.
Yeah.
And what so many of these movies neglect to put as their message is sometimes you need to be alone for a while. And one thing I really like about this is that he screws up the relationship with Rachel by cheating on her with Sarah, and then time passes and he pursues his dreams and what he wants to do. And you
see him clean up his life, because we see flashes of his apartment quite a lot throughout the film, and that's kind of a symbolic thing of him cleaning that up.
Yeah, and it sort of ends with the idea like, now that you took some time and actually worked on yourself, now you are awarded the rom-com ending. Woman. And not the love. Yeah. And I like that
it's the whole thing of, you accept the love you think you deserve. And
sure, yeah.
And it's not about, it's about being your best self.
Yeah. And so, but anyway, I just want to say I like that time passes. It's such an underused element of this kind of story, whereas I actually would argue it's maybe the most important element is time passing, growing up and changing and getting over it, essentially.
Yeah. I do want to ask, have you ever seen, there's a deleted scene from this film where they say goodbye at the airport?
Who does?
Peter and Sarah.
No, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so that's essentially what happens, is that Peter runs into Sarah at the airport, and they have a little bit of a discussion, and they decide to say goodbye on good terms. And then as Sarah walks away off to catch her flight, there's a flashback to their first kiss, and it's interesting because it's like, that feels like a closure scene in the film, but instead the last scene that Peter and Sarah share together is him calling her a bitch, essentially, after a failed blowjob. And it's interesting, and apparently in the DVD commentary, Jason Segel says that it's like a wish fulfillment scene that makes him look too perfect.
Right.
And so he said that the inelegance of the blowjob scene, it actually kind of makes them both look bad, and he wanted to keep that in. That it's like he's still got work to do, and it's a more kind of honest depiction of, how those things, when people leave your life, they don't, you often don't get closure. Like, you think about people that you've never seen, or you probably never will see again, and I'm sure you don't have some beautiful speech you gave them the last time you saw them.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that's what this movie gets, is how to not make caricatures out of people and situations.
Yeah, and it's like and avoiding tropes and pitfalls like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'll just quickly tell the first time I saw this film is it was one of those films because we were like 15 when it came out, and I think it might have been R16. I mean, the dude hangs dong in it. So, And it was one of those things where one of the guys with the cool mum had seen it, and I think there was we had it like on an iPod, and so this was one of my iPod.
This is such
films.
an iPod movie.
Yeah, this was an iPod movie, and I think he gave it to me to put on my iPod or something like that, or he had the DVD and I was able to burn it and put it on my iPod. But yeah, I remember watching it a lot of times on that, and then how I came to own a DVD I now cannot find, and I also swear I own Get Him to the Greek, but I cannot find it. I went under the house where I've got like another big box of DVDs. It wasn't in there. But anyway, it was one August afternoon. I was playing PlayStation or something like that, and Mum comes in the room, and she goes, "Do you like Forgetting Sarah Marshall?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Do you have it on DVD?" And I was like, "No." And she just handed it to me on DVD, and she's like, "I bought this for you last Christmas," and she like had put it in wherever she hides presents, and it must have been at the bottom of the pile and it got missed. And so she's like, "Okay, well there you go."
Yeah, nice. I on the Barbie episode, Richard, I talked about I won't go into this as to not dredge up the past, but I briefly talked about a time that I got real heartbroken. And when that happened to me,
it's at the end of part 2.
It's at the start of part 3. Actually, oh no, is it? Yeah. It's at the start of part 3. When that happened to me, I had I had this thing where the only thing I could think of, the only thing going through my head, was Peter's delivery of his Dracula musical, where the opening line is, "It's getting kind of hard to believe things are going to get better." And just, even in the silly voice, that's what was playing in my head. And I had to rewatch this movie at the time. And I'd love to talk about the Dracula musical, because it's especially in comparison to The Muppets, which we talked about a couple months back, because that was also written by Jason Segel, who didn't
Nicholas Stoller.
Yeah. Oh, okay, right. Yeah. Who didn't get the music for it. Didn't do the music for it. He got Brett McKenzie to do the music for it, and I believe you said, what was the analogy?
Yeah, essentially, I watched an interview with Jason Segel, and he said, I can write good songs or I can write funny songs, but I can't do both, and I need someone who can do both. And so, like his example, because he actually wrote a Dracula musical, and that was the thing. I think it was Judd Apatow found out that he was doing that and was like, "That's so fucking funny. You have to put that in the film." And it's like in the film, he says, because after he's debuted the play. People go, she's like, "Oh, it's so funny." He said, "Yeah, I didn't realize it was a musical, and someone said it was funny." That seems like that's kind of what happened to him in real life.
Right? Yeah.
He was writing this thing, and they're like, "That's so fucking stupid and funny," and he's like, "Yeah, it is."
Yeah. And so not only do I love that song and love that scene, I think it's true. I don't think it's a funny song. I think it's a good song. I think he's right what he said about Brett McKenzie, that he can't do both.
Well, I also can see why Jason Segel would write this and be like, this is my art.
Yeah. And what I also like about that is it's one of those things that really rounds out Peter as a character, because it's like, you don't like. I've got a theory. I don't think I've talked about this on pod. I think I just direct messaged you about this one time. I've got a theory that if you're ever watching a movie that you'll see it a lot in low budget debut features. You'll see it a lot in sort of like very outspoken directors, directors who are like public figures on social media,
like Tarantino,
or Edgar Wright, or Kevin Smith, actually, I think is maybe the best example. Whenever you see a main character in one of these movies and they have a very specific hobby, I believe, Richard, it is always because they couldn't make their film about filmmaking. Right?
Right.
So it's because they were writing about themselves and their character needed a passion for what I've experienced this. Yeah, I've experienced this writing films myself. And so they go, all right, what's the next one over? I recently watched Baby Done, which is a Kiwi film starring Rose Matafeo from Little Empire. Hi, Rose, if you're listening to this. We couldn't get you on the Barbie episode, so I presume you're probably not. And in that movie, she's an arborist, and they're going to like an arborist event overseas.
Screening.
And it's like, watching it, I was like, this is filmmaking. They're filmmakers, and they were going to make a film together, and one of them got pregnant. You know what I mean? Like, it's like...
Yeah.
And so what I like about him having the Dracula musical is like, it kind of masks that very clear metaphor to me, because it becomes, instead of he's not just a composer, you know, he's a composer who's making a Dracula puppet musical, and so it's so specific and so crosses the threshold of what should be what your main character maybe should have before they're too specific to be unrelatable, and it's in there. And I think that's something that I really appreciate about it, is that it's such a well thought out and well rounded specific thing to be joking about.
Yeah,
well, not necessarily joking about, but fill out a character with.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, like, a lot of the good stuff in this film comes from Jason Segel's life, because there's also, he talks about the nude breakup scene is something that actually happened in his life, and the movie is actually based around 4 real life breakups of his, one of which was with Linda Cardellini.
Really?
But he said the nude thing isn't her, and that she was a great girlfriend. But yeah, they were together. They were on Freaks and Geeks together, of course. And after Freaks and Geeks, Jason Segel, like, due to his height and things like that, struggled to get work.
Yeah. And
Judd Apatow told him, if you want to get work, you have to write it yourself. And so so he went and wrote Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And good on, and it's cool. He was already in How I Met Your Mother for a few years at this point. But it is really interesting watching, like, one of these roles where it's like, this is what made you a star, and it's true for both him and Russell Brand.
Was this Russell Brand's first big film?
Yeah, well, this is kind of like, because he was a radio host in the UK, but this is what, you know, propelled him to stardom. And because, you know, for a few years there, like, everyone was talking about Russell Brand, everyone wanted him in their film.
Oh, yeah. No, Russell Brand feels like...
It's like, because of this, it's like, yeah.
Right. It feels like Russell Brand, like, died. Like, he dropped out of the spotlight, I think intentionally, but to say, like, he was in everything, and now he's not in anything. And it feels like he's like a Heath Ledger type who just died.
Well, but he's now does all his really political kind of podcasts and all those. Yeah. It's like, well, because he got married and divorced from Katy Perry, which, my God, if you haven't seen the Katy Perry documentary, it's so good. It's so much better than it has any right to be.
Wow.
Because Russell Brand divorces her midway through.
Oh my God.
So what you would expect to just be, you know, oh, this is Katy Perry's on tour, look how hard she works. It actually becomes this really, really interesting documentary, and it's like, you can imagine the documenters, you know, getting halfway through this tour and being like, all right, this is another gig, and then she gets a phone call. The phone call is filmed of, like, Russell Brand essentially saying, like, I think that we shouldn't be together anymore, and she's taken this phone call, and, you know, you'd be like, they're behind the camera being like, fuck yes. But, and it becomes so
those
interesting.
French documentarians felt when they caught the first plane hitting the tower in 9/11. They're like, this is my 9/11.
But yeah, like genuinely don't write it off just because it came out at the same time as the Justin Bieber one, and there's like a One Direction one as well. Like, this one actually has a really interesting narrative because of the moment in her life they happened to capture. But yeah, no, you go.
I just want to keep talking about Forgetting Sarah Marshall. It was such a influential movie for me, and it does so many things right. It's a movie that I think there are a lot of movies like it that I hate, and it's because this one did everything right. And like including talking about what we were talking about before with like the him cheating on her scene, and sort of like it'd be so easy for this movie to be about this evil bitch, you know, who cheated on him,
a douchebag new boyfriend.
Yeah, but like I like Aldous Snow. I think Aldous Snow is a really interesting character, and I love the last time that Peter and Aldous see each other is when he's waiting to leave the hotel, and Peter like walks in and like waves at him and whistles, and he's like,
I love that entrance. I love that entrance. I think about it all the time.
Yeah,
it's such a choice.
Hopefully that'll mask over my piss poor whistle I just did, because I can't whistle very well. Yeah, and he's like when he's talking to him, and he's like, how you lasted 5 years with it? I got no idea. She's like, I don't want to say Hitler, but Goebbels, like a little Hitler. And watching it this time was the first time I'd watched it knowing who Goebbels is.
Yeah, like, and like not just being joke. Like, oh, I guess it would be difficult to go on a holiday with a couple of gerbils.
No, I thought it meant this is real funny actually. I thought it meant like sure. Like it's like a term for like I don't want to say it was Hitler, but sure, it was like a little Hitler, you know.
Right, yeah. Okay,
and so I love that scene. I love the kind of bonding, the resistant bonding both characters do in the film. I guess we'll talk more about Aldous Snow maybe in the Get Into the Greek section of the episode, because there's a lot to dig into there. But one thing but one thing that I really like in Forgetting Sarah Marshall is the relationship that Peter has with Bill Hader's character, his stepbrother. What's the character's name?
Step Stranger.
I can't remember the character's name, but
what is his name? Let's have a look. Brian, and his wife, who like he married out of middle school, and so it's like this polar opposite kind of example of a relationship. And there's just so many fucking characters in this movie that it's like there is a character played by Bill Hader named Brian, and Brian is never on screen with like Aldous Snow, you know, like these characters, like everything sort of orbits around Peter as a character, you know, and but it's like it's so interesting that these fully developed characters independent of each other. It's not something you necessarily see and stuff like this a lot. Because we haven't mentioned, but like Jonah Hill's in this. Is a waiter who's obsessed with Aldous, and we'll get to Jonah Hill in a moment. But you've also got Paul Rudd, Jack McBrayer, Billy Baldwin. Kristen Wiig appears as a yoga instructor in the unrated version, which I've seen multiple times.
I forgot that scene wasn't in the Netflix version because I've only seen the unrated version.
And also, and of course, this film famously ends, although it doesn't famously end because it's a weird thing to say about this movie, but it ends with like a prison rape joke and then a crash zoom on Jason Bateman's face, which like if that was a pub quiz question, which film ends like this is not what I would guess.
It's a real shame, like, because it's not a very funny joke. It's like Sarah Marshall's on a new crime show, and it's the trailer.
Where she talks to animals.
Yeah, and someone says the criminal they've just arrested says bitch, and Jason Bateman.
Yeah, it's like life's a bitch.
Going, where you're going, you'll be a bitch too, or whatever. And
that's exactly what you'll be.
That's exactly what you'll be. It's so gross, and it's such a for a movie that's actually, I don't want to necessarily say it's progressive, because I think there is an argument that there's still a lot of like sort of inherent misogyny in the storytelling, maybe just with what it's about, that you're always going to run into that problem. But it is progressive in the sense that it gives every character its dues. And to end on such a sad
think the thing
joke,
as well, you could argue though that it's like, you know, the show is supposed to look really bad because, and I do want to mention this as well, but like, that you know, it's saying the writers of the show are bad for stooping to that level, but it's like you still have put it in the movie. So, but I do think that it's weird that how it ends with like, oh, Sarah Marshall got another gig on a shitty looking show, but because the show she's on gets cancelled like midway through the movie, and she has to deal with that. And I've
Well,
I've
you
always
see the
thought, I
phone
guess
call
it's like,
and you see her heart drop, and you know the director was just going like, "Fuck yeah!" It's not the same as the Katy Perry documentary.
although apparently they shot that scene the day after she got the phone call that Veronica Mars had been cancelled.
Oh wow!
But they, it's what was I saying? Fuck, where were we going?
Sorry,
with this?
man.
Like I've always thought it was weird that, like, it feels like mean spirited to Sarah Marshall, that it's like, oh, don't worry, the dumb bitch still ended up on a shitty show, and it's like to just give this like final punchline, and then it's kind of done again and get into the Greek. But I guess I like now watching it again, I kind of see it as like the conversation she has with Peter after her show gets cancelled, and she talks about not wanting to do nude scenes and wanting to break into film, and he and he kind of, you know, wades through the bullshit, and she says that she's scared, and so it's actually like you can kind of read it as like good for her that she's staying in the public eye and like has a show again.
Maybe.
But
I
then
always
the fact
felt
that,
like it was written by two different people, and one person was more into the revenge porn aspect, and one person was like, no, these are real characters.
It's too revengey.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess if you just look at it, but then the fact that we see her on another show and Get Him to the Greek, although Get Him to the Greek's timeline's a little iffy, that, you know, it means that show didn't last long.
Yeah. Before we move on, I'd love to talk about this is one of those movies where I quote it all the fucking time. I'm always quoting. I'm quoting lines that aren't famous from this.
I'm quoting it right now.
like every now and then you'll see a Reddit thread that's like, "What's a not famous line from a movie that you and your friends quote all the time?" And this is such an example. This is quotes in it that I didn't realize were from this as well. One of my favorite jokes in it, and I'm watch the movie because the whole reason the joke's funny is the delivery, and now I'm going to try and do a fourth-rate version of that delivery, which is when Peter is telling Brian about how everything in his apartment reminds him of Sarah, and he picks up the cereal box, the like plastic cereal container, and is like, "See, I'd leave my cereal out and it always gets stale, so she got me the cereal box so that my cereal would always stay fresh, and now I have the freshest cereal." And like, I remember the first time watching it being like, what a fucking delivery! What a dream comedy delivery! Now I have the freshest cereal. There's so much like dumped on that one line. There's so much emotion in that one line where like, because what he's really saying is like, my life will not be the same without her. But if the line is about cereal. So I really like that. What are some of your favorite lines or jokes from
the freshest cereal was always one of mine as well. I used to always love the I wish I wasn't wearing this fucking shirt. And then when she says, "Peter, what are you doing here?" and he goes, "I came here to murder you." And it's such like a perfect like that would have seemed like such a good idea just before he said it.
No,
like, to just make a joke out of it.
Richard, I would say that because my brain would be like, address what it looks like so it's clear it's not this. You know? That's what it'd be like. And I love you sound like you're from London. I am, mate. Yeah.
I also love the when he says, like, "I'm not crying, you're crying." He's like, "I'm not crying, I'm not a baby." He's like, "Oh, really? Because you look like a giant baby. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that at all." He just runs it together, and that was like another quotable thing.
He gave up
this line is just this movie's just filled with lines like that.
He gave up a blowjob mid-blowjob. I love that line. It's such a uniquely male thing.
He's like Gandhi, but he likes it but better. He likes puppets.
Anyway, I don't know if quoting this movie is the best way to deliver this content to people, but there you
go. Just between the two movies, what do you think this says on Rotten Tomatoes?
I did see it when I was looking it up the other day to find cast members or something or other in it. 83.
That's right. And so just some randomly placed useless statistics for the middle of this episode. This is our second franchise in which Jason Segel sings a song from the Muppets. After the Muppets. It's also our second Jason Segel, Nicholas Stoller collaboration after the Muppets.
Mm.
And also, the other big thing that I fucking love from this film is his "Peter, You Suck" song. Peter, you suck.
Yeah.
Peter, you suck. Peter, you don't do anything of value.
You should go see a psychiatrist. I don't want to. It's so good. One other thing I love that always stuck with me, and is something again that I quote all the time, is how often Peter is asking people to stop laughing at him. It's this, like, Peter's such a complex character, and people will be like giving him shit, and no matter what the situation is, there'll be a moment where he'll be like, "Please stop laughing. Please don't." Like, he tries to kiss Mila Kunis, and she backs away, and so he tries to give her a handshake, and she's like, "Handshake, really?" And the look on his face is so like he's so in tune with his emotions that he doesn't he's not polite about it. He's just sort of like, "This is really awkward, and you're making this worse." And then at the end, when Mila Kunis turns up to his dressing room and sees him naked, and she's laughing, and even though it's like the emotional closure of the film, he's like, "Can you please stop laughing?" It's so genuine. I love it.
Other useless statistics. This is our second franchise to mention Huma Huma Nuka Nuka Apawa'a after the extended edition of High School Musical 2, which is, of course, the State Fish of Hawaii. And this is our second Mila Kunis Kristen Bell collaboration after Bad Moms.
Oh
which,
my God!
Actually came after it, obviously. But
I've never made that connection before, that they're in this movie together. Interesting.
Yeah, this also features a cameo from Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City.
Oh, our second Cynthia Nixon franchise.
Yeah, so it's they're all just coming together. If you're wondering, like, I don't remember Cynthia Nixon's cameo on this. The bit where he's getting drunk by himself and he pretends to be on Sex and the City, and he goes, "Oh, I'm Samantha." Cynthia Nixon walks in the background.
Nice.
This is a Barbie theme song to a Barbie movie. Let's all sing along in our natural voices. We're watching 37 fucking Barbie movies. Jesus, oh God, why?
So, 2 years later, this was followed by a somewhat sequel, somewhat spin-off called Get Him to the Greek. 2010. Again, directed by Nicholas Stoller. This one only has 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. Well, I say only, but it's still certified fresh. It's still like a positive reviews, but it's down a little bit from Forgetting Sarah Marshall. And so this is carries on the character of Aldous Snow. And AJ, what is it about?
So it's about Aldous Snow in some indeterminate time in the future from Forgetting Sarah Marshall. He was sort of famously sober in the first one, but you see him fall off the wagon. And in this, he's now like totally coked out all the time. He's just getting over the release of his his Chinese democracy. Is that what it's called? the Guns N' Roses. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know if that's there's a very good reference, but I don't know if that's the most apt comparison, because Chinese democracy, it took a long time to come out, but it wasn't necessarily that poorly received.
Oh, I thought it was poorly received. I don't know anything. I just know that was maybe the title of that album. He really
very good. Yeah, Chinese democracy just famously took a very, very long time to come out. And people were like, "Oh yeah, this probably would have been better like 10 years ago," because that's kind of the weird thing about it, is it's very overproduced.
Right. So yeah, he's just released his first big dud album called African Child, which is touted as being the worst thing to happen to Africa since insert apartheid and things like that. And so he's like very much in a trough of his life. The love of his life, Jackie Q, played by who I did not realize till rewatching this film, Rose Byrne. I did not know it was right.
That's so funny, because I only know I just knew Rose Byrne from this movie.
Because I'd only seen Get Into the Greek maybe once or twice, and it was before Rose Byrne was like a recognizable actress. And so seeing her, I was like, this character's played by Rose Byrne. But anyway, the main character of the film is a guy named Aaron, who is somewhat confusingly, certainly worthy of a talking point, played by Jonah Hill.
It will be a talking point, don't worry.
Jonah Hill not reprising his role from Forgetting Sarah Marshall. What's his character's name in Forgetting Sarah Marshall? Do we ever find
Matt.
out? Matt. So he's not playing the same character, but he works for Pinnacle magazine. He's like a music journalist maybe, or like a what is this?
Well,
job?
it works for like a record label.
Yeah, okay. And so the record label run by a guy named Sergio, played by P. Diddy, is like trying to figure out how to, boost sales or revolutionize their fledgling label. And Aaron is like, well, hey, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of Infant Sorrow playing at the Greek Theatre, Infant Sorrow being Aldous Snow's band. And he's like, what if we get Aldous Snow and we get him to do a reunion concert, and et cetera, et cetera. They go for it, and the adventure is sort of a road movie of Aaron, who's just broken up with his girlfriend, played by Elizabeth Moss. It's him and getting Aldous to the Greek Theatre from London, and it is
London.
It is, of course, fraught with difficulty because Aldous is an off the wagon rock star. Sorry, who sort of the way he's portrayed in this film is like everyone says yes to him, and so Aaron is told by Sergio, you've basically got to not ever deny him anything, but also get him to the Greek.
Yeah, great. So this is. Let's just dive straight into the Jonah Hill the Jonah Hill of it all.
Okay.
So Jonah Hill, doesn't reprise his character, and that's one of the things that is kind of confusing about it. So actually, there's a few elements we have to kind of talk about. If we're talking about the art of a sequel, if this is what this podcast is truly about, which we so often claim it is, that.
And we have so seldom back that up.
We have to discuss, when does this film take place, and or when does Forgetting Sarah Marshall take place, and what's the deal with Jonah Hill's recast?
Because I think part of the problem is how intrinsically tied to Aldous Snow Jonah Hill's character was in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Like, if it was Bill Hader playing a new character and Get Him to the Greek, I'd be like, yeah, fine. Like, those characters never meet in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. It's not as jarring. But when you're seeing Jonah Hill playing against Russell Brand,
playing two different characters who obsess over Aldous Snow.
Yeah, in very different ways. Yeah, it is strange. Yeah.
So, we're shown the movie starts. Get Him to the Greek starts with Aldous Snow releasing African Child. It goes to the set of the music video, and then it bombs, and it flashes to sometime later. For some reason, I thought it was 7 years, but I don't know if that's necessarily.
No, it is. It says he's been sober for 7 years, and I think his kid with Jackie Q is 7.
Yeah, because so they've just had the kid when they're on the African Child set. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
And then when we get to present day, there's some indeterminate amount of time. I think that Aldous Snow's the Live at the Greek Theatre was probably released around the time that Forgetting Sarah Marshall is supposed to be set, and then African Child would have been like what he did after Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and then he, then all's falling off the wagon happened again, and then we catch up to today. Although the movie explicitly takes place in 2009, so it doesn't necessarily work out. And
you're saying Forgetting Sarah Marshall's set in 1999.
Yeah, or 98 even, but
I don't know.
This is what I'm saying. They're like, obviously it doesn't, and maybe it's like a floating timeline kind of thing. However, this is all to say that the way I kind of approach this film, I actually love what this film does with the timeline and the recut, and changing Jonah Hill's character. And the example I often use is Horrible Bosses, when I talk about like. You didn't need to make a sequel to Horrible Bosses. You could have just given me a film with Jason Sudeikis, Jason Bateman, and Charlie Day playing different characters, because clearly that's why the first one worked, is because those characters were so great together. And so just fucking I don't care if they're playing the same characters or not. Just give me those same people together. You have this character of Aldous Snow, who they clearly loved writing, and Russell Brand loved playing, and they just thought, okay, well, what's the most interesting story we can tell with Aldous Snow? It's like, okay, well, what if he hasn't been... Okay, yeah, what if he's kind of washed up? What if he... And then it's like, oh, you come up with the idea for African Child, and then you come up with the idea for the story of like, okay, it's an anniversary concert, so we're having him, back into the spotlight. And then they go... Well, actually, he had pretty funny chemistry with Jonah Hill in the last film. Yeah, but it wouldn't really make sense if his character from Forgetting Sarah Marshall was somehow assigned to get him to the Greek. So, okay, fuck it, let's just take Jonah Hill, put him in a different role, because we know these two actors work well together. And so I think it's a really interesting thing that it's essentially I think it's the same. It's Nicholas Stoller who wrote Forgetting Sarah Marshall as well. He wrote this one by himself. He wrote Jason Segel, wrote Forgetting Sarah Marshall by himself. I thought Nicholas Stoller had a pass at the script as well, but doesn't look like it. But anyway, I like the idea that they're just handing off the character of Aldous Snow and just saying go nuts with it to Nicholas Stoller.
So I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I don't agree that the chemistry of Jonah Hill and Russell Brand is so insurmountable that you need to cast Jonah Hill in this role. I was thinking about it while watching, and it's like, I don't know, this is the low-hanging fruit, but like Michael Cera could have been great in the role that Jonah Hill plays.
Christopher Mintz-Plasse could have done it.
If you're wanting to still play in the Apatow toy box, I not only think that Jonah Hill isn't your only option, I don't know if Jonah Hill is that good in this role either. I find this era Jonah Hill very hard to see as like the invest in this character protagonist. I think Superbad works because he's the crass one to Michael Cera's sweet one, and you're supposed to find the character of Aaron quite sweet in this. And I find that difficult with Jonah Hill.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, I mean, I guess it's not so much that it's like insurmountable, but it's proven.
But I don't even know if it's that. Like, I don't watch Forgetting Sarah Marshall and be like, God, the chemistry between Jonah Hill.
Oh yeah, because the whole dynamic is that Russell Brand and the older Snow is kind of ignoring him. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they got along together really well on set.
I think that's what it is.
They came up with this idea. Yeah, and it's like I'm fine with that
because I actually think the dynamic between Aldous and Matt from Forgetting Sarah Marshall is maybe almost something that feels tampered with by casting Jonah Hill as Aaron Green. Like you are destroying this pure little relationship or not really relationship, but dynamic. I don't know. It doesn't ruin. I actually quite like this movie, so it doesn't ruin the movie for me. It's just I find it's a very confusing thing to just do for seemingly very little reason. And I think there was maybe a conversation should have been had about who else could play Aaron Green, because I don't think it was only Jonah Hill who could have played him.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but it's something that I think I never thought that hard about for some reason, and especially when it came to the timeline, that it wasn't until watching it this time when I'm like, yeah, actually the timeline is a little bit messed up by all this. But yeah, I think for some reason in my head as well that Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Get Him to the Greek came out so long apart. Like Get Him to the Greek is one of these movies that I remember hearing like, oh, apparently they're doing a spin-off, and it's like, oh, that'll never happen.
I remember
and then
that
it's
as
like
well.
years later it's announced, and then you're like, oh my god, they're actually doing it, and then it gets filmed, and then you're like, no, I'll believe it when I see it. But the movies came out 2 years apart, and I discovered Forgetting Sarah Marshall like after it had been, like, it would have been late, probably later in 2008. But yeah, it's crazy that these movies and now I think about movies that came out 2 years ago, and I'm like, fuck, was that 2 years ago?
Well, it's because one of these movies came out when I was year 10 and the other one came out when I was year 13 or year 12. So, like...
Yeah. So it's the same. It's year 11 and year 13 for me. Is it like one I actually saw in the movies?
Yeah. So I think this movie has a lot of really good stuff going for it. There's one really bad scene, which we might talk about later on. One thing I really like about this film, I really like, so I'd seen this and I was talking about like lines that I'd quote from Forgetting Sarah Marshall all the time. I had that with Get Him to the Greek as well, But I think because I didn't watch it and it sort of just fell out of my life, I forgot these lines existed. And so then watching it again, I would hear lines and be like, that's hilarious. I remember saying that all the time to my friends. The one that really strikes me is when Aaron is coming down after taking something called a Jeffrey, which is sort of a cocktail of many different drugs. And he's freaking out as he's coming down in the limousine. And Russell Brand, Elder Snow, who's sort of, hungover as well, says what must be an improvised line, because I think he says it twice. He goes, "Aaron, stop it, you're being very strange." And me and my friends just thought it was so funny to use the word strange there.
Yeah.
not stop it, you're freaking me out.
And the character Older Snow is played by David Thewlis in that one scene. That's your voice.
Oh no, David Thewlis is
way the same voice as your David Thewlis.
No way! No, this is my Russell Brand.
And this is my David Thewlis.
They're totally different. What are you talking about? One's raspier. I also remember, I don't know the words. I just play the drums and do the Africa face.
That's the one line that everyone quotes.
Yeah.
But there's so many. I think there's a lot funnier lines
Stroke the furry wall.
Around that scene. Like when Jonah Hill runs into people and says, "Are you to so-and-so? My mom loves your shit."
Yeah, that's so good. I really like, so the kind of the crescendo of this film ends, everyone's pissed off at each other because Jonah Hill, again, a similar Forgetting Sarah Marshall actually, has slept with women on the road and then found out that his girlfriend Daphne didn't actually want to break up, and so there's a sort of Schwimmerian we were on a break kind of situation going on. And the way that it ends up sort of being fixed is that Aldous turns up at their house after finding out that after being rejected by Jackie Q and finding out that their son probably isn't actually his son, and Aldous suggests that they all have a threesome. And I really love the threesome scene. I think it's I really love in movies where like emotional breakthroughs or emotional stories or important emotional beats are told through something that's deeply uncomfortable, and this is that. And he's sort of, clearly outperforming Aaron on Daphne, and Aaron feels real weird about it. So then he walks up to Aldous, grabs his face and kisses him, then grabs his dick. And it's so it's so good. I love that beat because it's like it's Jonah Hill crossing the threshold, and being like, fine, let's have a threesome, bro.
It's him taking control.
Yeah, right. And then Aldous is like, I've very seriously misjudged this situation. And he leaves, and it's that event that allows Aaron and Daphne to then reconcile their relationship, and Aaron and followed by another I thought was very powerful scene where Aldous calls up Aaron and tells him that he's going to kill himself, and so Aaron goes to stop him, and Aldous is in a swimming pool that he's just jumped off the top of a roof into, and he goes, "I'm lonely, mate," and it's this very sweet, genuine scene, and I really like Russell Brand in this movie. I think this is a deeper story for Aldous Snow that we weren't given. I mean, he's a movie that's what happens
when they flesh out the character a lot more.
Yeah, but they do it well. And like Forgetting Sarah Marshall was already portrayed him as a deep character, but this really portrayed kind of the other side of this life of luxury. Like you don't really see the disadvantages of his rock star lifestyle in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. In fact, it almost deliberately doesn't show you that, whereas this is sort of like you live by the sword, you die by the sword kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. That scene, because I messaged you last night and I was like, you could tell me Russell Brand's amazing in this film or terrible in this film, and I would probably be able to agree with both. But I think part of what it is, because I also like that scene in the pool. Because I haven't seen this movie in a while. Apparently, I watched it on November 11th, 2018, according to my Letterboxd, but I thought I hadn't seen it for a decade. But the scene where he says, in the pool, that was the scene I was kind of looking forward to, because I was like, I want to see if I could make a call about whether Russell Brand's good in this film or not. And I think I spoke about this when we did the MCU, that Craglin's reaction to Yondu's death in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, spoilers for Guardians of the Galaxy 2, but like his reaction to that is kind of weird, and the way he yells, it's like
it's too good for the film.
Well, it's like no, it's you could interpret that as Sean Gunn being a bad actor or Kraglin being uncomfortable with his emotions, and I think that like that because that scene in the swimming pool is like him opening up, but he's so dead inside that it actually, like, you know, he's not necessarily the strongest actor, but I think that kind of really works. And the I'm lonely, mate, I'm really lonely is such a good line, and it's such a good delivery, and it's like I'm lonely, mate is like, for some reason that is the fact that he calls him mate. And I mean, it's just a British thing. It's just what he does throughout the whole film. But it makes for a really nice line and delivery.
Well, one of the consistencies of Elder Snow's character is he's actually very accommodating for the people in his life. He's actually very polite and friendly, I think. You've just got to get past, you've just got to talk to him first. When you sent me that line, when you sent me that you didn't know if Russell Brand was good or bad in this, I thought you were talking about the line when he first meets Aaron Green, where he walks up behind him and goes, "Hello, I'm Elder Snow, the famous rock star." It's such a, like, this is either a bad delivery or Nicholas Stoller was like, "No, say it like this." Like it's such a like it's almost feels like expositional, like, you know. It's so funny. It's
it's the movie isn't called Mission Impossible, Tom Hanks. On Mission Impossible. Tom Hanks. It's
it is called Mission Impossible.
I got so much about that wrong.
Tom Hanks. Imagine Tom Hanks in Mission Impossible.
No, he's in a movie not called Mission Impossible.
Anyway, sorry, right. That line's actually from Sleepless in Seattle, right? Yeah. Alrighty.
Yeah.
Should we talk about
this wacky time?
The scene in this? Let's talk about the scene,
the
bad scene, and then let's end on a high talking about the music for this movie.
Yeah, man.
To give people a bit of a content warning, this is one of those films that was right on the edge, right on the cusp of like the sort of cultural revolution of realizing that sexual assault isn't something you should joke about. So content warning, we're about to discuss a scene that hasn't aged very well, to put it, for a movie 2010 that's so shamefully recent for a joke like this in it. So the scene is basically, while they're out partying, Sergio hooks Aaron up with a girl named Destiny, and she like takes him back to a different room and proceeds to mount him and then pull out a dildo and put it up his butt, all against his will. Like, he doesn't want it. And it's
and he's like screaming.
And then to sort of hit the nail on the head, when he returns back to the main room with Elder Snow, he goes, "I think I've just been raped." And it's so interesting because, like, we've talked about movies like Revenge of the Nerds, where there is a categorical example of rape in it, but it's not depicted in the movie as rape. But this is a movie which, if they hadn't said "I've just been raped," I'd be like, yeah, because the writers don't know what rape is, you know. But they say it. They say it. They call it what it is, and it's like this classic example of like, well, when it happens to men, it can be joked about. Am I right, fellas? Am I right, other sexually insecure men who wrote every Hollywood movie in this time period?
It's also just fun fact about that scene, that the actress who plays Destiny, who tries to gag Jonah Hill with the dildo, is the same actress who offered to be gagged in Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
I did think it was her.
Yeah.
Are they the same girl in your mind? Or there's so many casting inconsistencies.
Yeah, Carla Gallo is her name.
The guy who does the in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, who says the Hawaiian fish name. He's one of the execs in Get Into the Greek. So there's already precedent, more than enough precedent that they're just reusing actors, I guess.
Yeah, I love if like the only character they bring over all these actors, but the only characters they bring over are Destiny and Alder Snow. There is also before we move on to the music, there's one kind of funny thing, and it's become funny in the last decade thing in this film. So there's a scene the first time that they're spending the night in London, and it's doesn't it make sense that we should stay here and have the time of your life? That was like the trailer line. And so it's like your goal is to keep Aldous sober and to get him to the Greek. And so he, Aldous is walking around and partying and drinking. And there's one bit where he's making out with a girl. He's got a drink in one hand. He's making out with a girl, and Jonah Hill pushes her face away from Aldous's, trying to stop distracting him. And that girl is Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex.
Are you serious? Wow.
Yeah.
I'll have to rewatch it. That's crazy. That is insane. That's very bad. The royals aren't going to be happy about that. I mean, they're all how much more mad could they be with her? I guess at this stage. That's really funny. Interesting.
Yeah,
because so this must have been pre-Suits.
Pre-Suits. Yeah. So she essentially had her rise to fame as an actress. She's also actually, speaking of Horrible Bosses, she's also a delivery girl on Horrible Bosses.
Right.
So yeah.
Does she make out with anyone?
Which came out a year later. No, she doesn't. And then when did Suits start? I've never watched Suits.
My parents watched it. It was one of those shows where it's like, why are you watching
came out 2011 as well.
Why are you watching this, Mum and Dad? You wouldn't let me watch this. You'd turn this off if I was watching this in the lounge. And I just watched it.
Yeah. So, the music.
The music overall for both films, I think, is a good way to discuss this. Because there's this is sort of
we're treated to a lot more infant sorrow in this.
Yeah. If you're a patron of ours, or even if you listen to our Patreon sample pack from a few weeks back and heard us talk about Walk Hard, this is a very similar situation where it's not really. The songs aren't really that funny. They're like, some of them are comically like. They've got like innuendo in them, but I don't think any more than what real pop songs, like sexy pop songs, have. There's not much difference between something like "Inside of You" by Infant Sorrow and "Big Balls" by AC/DC.
Yeah, I mean that's an extreme example, but it's this kind of weird thing where. They're a little bit funny for the audience, but there's a reason that they'd be taken seriously within the universe. Because with the songs that we see are like "Inside of You," which is we were shown in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, but now we kind of hear the big band the band version of that. But there's also African Child, obviously. But we'll come back to African Child. But yeah, there's Bangers and Mash, which is like
the ballad.
The ballad is like about bangers, beans, and mash, and which was actually written by Jason Segel. There's a song called "Little Bird" which plays over the credits, which is about like lusting after a potentially underage girl,
which is great because the movie is not saying like I get a kick out of like fictional. Like movies within movies is always like something that's really enjoyable for me, and learning of like the fictionalized life and times of celebrities that only exist in this movie, and it makes sense that Infant Sorrow would have like a dicey, hasn't aged very well song about wanting to bang a 17-year-old.
Yeah. And also the kind of the big song that because Aldous asks Aaron what his favorite Infant Sorrow song is, and he says it's one called "The Clap," and then that's the one that he ends up playing on the Today Show, and it's a very like upbeat thing, and this is what you said to me, and it's what I've always thought as well, is that like based on the limited kind of snapshot we have of the music of Infant Sorrow, I can see why that would be someone's favorite. And to me, it's so interesting, like the idea of writing the movie and being like, cool, now we need to put some songs in here, that you can go to an artist and be like, we want you to write the fan favorite song of this fictional band. And a similar thing happens in A Star Is Born, that the first song we hear in that movie is like, without hearing any of his discography, I know why he started the concert with this song.
Right.
And then actually it comes up here as well. There's Going Up. They talk about what song they should open the concert with. And it's, I guess opening, like writing a starting song, but it's not even necessarily like, oh, I have a song that builds and it'll be really good to start with. But there's a really specific sound to opening songs at concerts. It's weird, but it's such an interesting thing for me. Like for me, I find it so interesting that they can nail that.
Yeah, well, because it's I guess a lot of it is playing off your subconscious awareness of what bands that Infant Sorrow is based off are like, and so they're probably pulling a lot from that. A guy at my high school who played Jesus in Godspell got suspended for performing Inside of You on ukulele at a parents-teacher meeting. And then
so funny.
And then at the leavers assembly, so like the last ever assembly you have at high school, they were all doing this big musical number. All the prefects were doing this musical number, and it was right around the time that Sexy and I Know It had just come out. And so like they were doing that, and like right as it reaches the drop, he like the same guy like dances up through the crowd on the stage and then rips his pants off for the is Wiggle Wiggle, is that one? I'm Sexy and I Know It?
I don't know, man. These are all the same fucking song.
and he wiggled his very loose backage around for that part, and then ended it with him singing Inside of You, and then ran off stage and was like, "See you later, guys. Have a good life." That was very funny.
That's so funny.
But I love Inside of You. I've always thought that's a very sweet. It's such a deceptive song because it's like, it could easily be one of those things where it's like, if you're not listening to it, you would think it's a lot more heartfelt and sweet than it is. And which brings me to one thing I want to talk about as well, which is one of those fun fictional world building things, which is you hear a song at the start of this film that goes like, "Let's get fucked, let's get fucked, let's get fucked out on the town," and then it goes from being you hearing this song on like a behind the music kind of documentary thing on Elder Snow and it transitions it into being the song that is playing on Jonah Hill's radio that's waking him up in the morning. But as it cuts to it, it changes from "let's get fucked" to "let's have fun." So it's the radio edit of the song, and it's such a nice little touch that it's like, "Let's get fucked, let's get fucked, let's get fucked out on the town, let's get fun, let's have fun out on the town," and it's like, yeah, that's there's a cool fictional history built there with Infant Sorrow that I really appreciate, and I think it would have been very fun to construct and put together.
Yeah. And also we get that as well with Jackie Q, who has 3 songs on the soundtrack: Super Tight, Ring Round, and Pound Me in the Buttocks. And Ring Round is about anal, and Pound Me in the Buttocks, I'm sure you can make a guess as to what that's about. And Super Tight is about more or less the same thing. But so that's it's pretty funny. That's like her thing. And yeah, I do want to mention African Child. What do you think of African Child, the song?
I don't, from what I've heard of Infant Sorrow, I don't think it's necessarily any better or worse than the other music. I do think, like, lyrically, it's a little more ridiculous. Like, they go over the top lyrically so that it can be comfortably called, like, a racist piece of shit, I guess. But it doesn't sound that bad.
Well, I guess, and that's the thing. I remember, I wasn't able to find it again, but I remember reading an interview in 2010 about with the writers of the song, and they were talking about the song, and they kind of said like, it has to actually be like a decent song because you don't want to devote time in a movie to a song that actually sounds bad to listen to, but it also has to be believable that it ruined Infant Sorrow's career, and so. It's like, okay, we'll make the lyrics really bad, but you still want people to be walking out of the theater humming it.
Yeah. There's a little African child inside me, or however it goes.
Trapped in
me. There's also where it ends with him finally creating a hit, which is called Stroke the Fairy Wall, which is a reference to when Aaron is on drugs and they find a furry wall.
Yeah, because it ends with a little flash forward to like 6 months later. He's been sober since then, and he's now, he's essentially got his life together. He's got a good relationship with his son. Aaron now now manages him, or now produces, and he's released what's finally a hit.
Yeah.
For him.
And
It's
how
called
good is
Furry
Russell
Walls,
Brand's acting there that I can tell the difference between drunk Aldous and sober for 6 months Aldous.
Yeah.
Like there's genuine difference in those portrayals.
But yeah, the song. What do you think of the song "Fairy Walls"?
Again, I don't know if it's any better or worse than the other ones.
I always thought that about "Fairy Walls" is that like it's not my favorite song on the soundtrack, but I guess I can see why. Oh, this is a return to form after African Child. But Hanson, remember Hanson? They did a cover of "Fairy Walls." I remember that. And I remember.
Awesome.
Posting and they posted it with this article with this like paragraph explaining what a big influence Infant Sorrow has always been on their music, which is quite funny. And I remember posting a thing on Facebook that was like, they're fucking legends for covering this, because that's how I talked in 2010.
This is, Richard, I think this might be the only example of a franchise like this that we've ever covered. I don't think we've done another 2-film franchise, which is a single film and its spin-off. I don't know if any can come to mind. Like, we've done...
Well, I can't really think it... Well, it's hard to think of even just, like, that many spin-off films.
Well,
I guess you have, like, Air Buddies.
Yeah, what I was going to say is we have covered franchises which have the same breed of spin-off that Get 'Em to the Greek is. Like, I would say Puss in Boots is the same thing to Shrek.
Where it's like a character, but it's like just go nuts with it.
It's a character where it almost fucks with the timeline because of how disregarding it is. So we've seen stuff. We've seen stuff like Get 'Em to the Greek, but this is one of those franchises where it's like, I would understand if someone didn't think this counted as a franchise.
But you know what? Like, fucking my God, doing this after Barbie. What a treat.
What a treat. That would be a great treat for me. That's a line that I always say that. It's from Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Having sex with either of you would be a great treat for me. I don't say that first part a lot, but I say it would be a great treat for me quite a lot. I think this film made me realize how funny of a word treat is to say instead of other words in its place. And referring to something like sex as a treat.
All right, well, let's just, we've got a couple of segments to get through. I do want to talk about something we talk about a lot on this podcast, which is titles.
Yeah.
We talk about titles a lot on this podcast. And what do you think of the titles of these films?
I think that they aren't the most amazing titles in the world, and I think that Get 'Em to the Greek especially feels like there was maybe a better thing to come up with. They're very like I can't imagine a lot of thought went into these titles. Although
I think Forgetting Sarah Marshall, I think, is an incredible title.
Yeah, now there are other films around the same time. That film could have very easily be called something like "Get Over Her" or "Getting Over Her." You know, something like "She's Out of My League" comes to mind. Although I kind of like that title. I don't know. I'm not in love with any of the titles, but I think that Get 'Em to the Greek. What do you think of Get 'Em to the Greek as a title?
Yeah, Get 'Em to the Greek is such an interesting.
It feels like
title.
he couldn't think of a title until the last minute, and he'd thought of Get 'Em to the Greek, and he's like, I guess. It's got some fun alliteration in it. But
it's a fun title to say it. It sounds cool. It looks like in France it was called American Trip. Canada, the French title translates to 72 hours. There's also Mission Rockstar. A few of them have looks like it's been called.
These are all worse than Get 'Em to the Greek.
And the working title in the US was Get Me to the Gig.
I don't know. Do you have any ideas of what you could call this movie?
Get Oldest.
I mean, could you name it after any of the songs? Do they lend themselves to being?
Let's Get Fucked.
No, not really. You couldn't call it African Childhood.
Going Up.
Yeah. This movie could have been called Going Up.
Well, it's one of those, like, I don't know. Get 'Em to the Greek is kind of nonsensical as, like, yeah, I don't know, because Forgetting Sarah Marshall tells you a little bit about the film, but Get Him to the Greek is like, well, what does that mean? Unless, I guess, is the Greek theater like, is that like a ubiquitous kind of thing?
Oh yeah.
In the US, like, I mean, it's not so much here, like, where if it was like Get Him to Madison Square. That I feel is a bit more universal.
Get him to
but
AMI Stadium. Another fun little local reference.
Get him to the cake tin.
If this was more explicitly a sequel to Forgetting Sarah Marshall, like if this was about Peter, say Peter is in
Peter.
Lois. We were doing that all the way through our road trip, just for anyone who wants to. It
is a road trip. You said it wasn't a road trip.
It wasn't a road trip. I'm just calling it a road trip because that's easier to explain. If Peter Breda was in place of Aaron Green, like plot contrivances aside, and it was more specifically a sequel to Forgetting Sarah Marshall, could there be a title that would work the same and be the same sort of musical sound as Forgetting Sarah Marshall, like Forget
Him to the Greek,
forgetting Jackie Q, or forgetting or helping Elder Snow, like is that the name of the series? Maybe they could have done like a snow theme with the title.
Right, yeah.
Snow Falls. Falling snow?
That's bad.
That's bad.
All right, let's move on to continue the franchise.
I'd love to hear alternative titles if anyone has any ideas. From the working titles, it makes me think that no one was really ever happy with any of the potential titles.
Well, no, that's not the working title. The only working title I gave you was Get Me to the Gig, and the rest were all like other languages.
But so far, no one has come up with a good title for this movie. Not even the people who made the movie.
Okay, so continue the franchise. This is a segment on our podcast where, if you listened to our podcast last week, you might know this already, but we pitch continuations of the franchise. So this could be a movie, a book, or one of those two. So what is your continuation of the franchise?
So, I think that I'm surprised that there haven't been more continuations of this franchise already. I think it would be very hard at this point to go away from Elder Snow as a character, though, and so maybe it's for the best. But I feel, though, Richard, that if Forgetting Sarah Marshall is like the nexus point of this universe, I think there's one character that we still need to see find closure, and that's Sarah Marshall. So, like, I think Sarah Marshall needs her Get Him to the Greek movie, because out of that...
That's so funny. We have the same idea.
Yeah? I've got some other ones if you want. So, I like, just because... like, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, for those four leads, Forgetting Sarah Marshall has closure for Peter and Rachel. Get Him to the Greek, like, takes care of Aldous. And I feel like, especially with these kinds of movies kind of being intrinsically more feminist these days, that, as I said before, there is kind of a darkness to Forgetting Sarah Marshall that it feels like, for as progressive as it is with its characters, it then kind of like gives into the revenge porn. So I think I would like even remove it from being a sitcom, from a spin-off, sorry. Remove it from being a spin-off. I would love to see a movie about an actress who's only been able to star in, two season-long TV shows in her whole career, sort of finding herself, and that's what I've called it. I've called it Finding Sarah Marshall. And spirit
That's
of
great.
Finding Dory.
I had the exact same idea that it should be about Sarah Marshall.
I guess it is the obvious way to go.
It's the obvious one because it's if you take Forgetting Sarah Marshall as like the introduction to all these characters, I had a title, Back Together, or Back to Get Her. But and just keeping the get theme in it, and because I thought it'd be fun if it was like together or something like that, where the word get is hidden in the middle of it,
or it's like coded different to the other.
Yeah.
That's a cool title.
Yeah, so it'd be called Back Together or something like that, but like To Get and Her would be like different colors or something like that. And I just thought of that, like, again, it's like a kind of nonsensical title, similar to Get Him to the Greek. Although Get Him to the Greek obviously makes sense as a title, but it's
Back
it's just like, oh yeah, that just sounds cool, whatever.
Back Together implies that it's going to be about her either getting back with Peter or Aldous.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
I don't
yeah,
think
but
it
it would be like it would be established like very early on in the film that like, oh, there's a movie she can go for and it's called Back Together or something like that, you know.
And her agent is played by Mila Kunis, but it's not her reprising her role.
Yeah, so my my other ideas I had were similar things of like, let's do a film now starring Jonah Hill as Aaron Green and Russell Brand plays a different character. And so it's like each film has like one character anchored from it. And then so, you know, you would introduce and then Paul Rudd would be in it again, playing a different character. And then in the fourth movie, Paul Rudd's character stays the same. And then so we're just like everyone's chopping and changing, but you keep one active, like one character from the last film.
Do you know that's not especially dissimilar from the View Askew universe, the Kevin Smith View Askew universe, because they have recurring actors but also recurring characters at the same time. I remember reading on IMDb back in 2008 someone talking about doing a sequel to Forgetting Sarah Marshall called Escaping Sarah Marshall, where Sarah Marshall like comes after Peter, and so that's where I sort of started with the idea, and I was like, that's too fantastical, and I'd actually rather see a Sarah Marshall sympathetic story.
Yeah, for sure.
But I am surprised that they never continued this in any other way, especially because now it feels like it's too late to do it now, you know, 10 years later. It kind of feels like it would need to be something that you'd strike when it's hot. So yeah, interesting that we had similar ideas. That's very funny.
So it's now time to rank that franchise.
Alrighty.
So have you got the list open?
I don't. Do you?
Yep.
All right, you do it.
Okay. So Forgetting Sarah Marshall's this is an interesting one because its status as a franchise, it doesn't get many points there, but also we do both love both of these films. So it's obviously going in the top half, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That like mathematically it almost feels like it could get dangerously high. but
yeah, if you're just talking about the quality of the two films.
But that's what it is,
how
though.
we agree on them.
It's the quality of the two films, but not as them as a franchise is actually relatively irrelevant to how we like
Should
them.
this be the new Nymphomaniac constant, where it's like they're both amazing films, but they're not a franchise?
Is it that they're not a franchise, or just that the reason? Because like,
Yeah, no, I kid.
What's in first place at the moment?
Toy Story.
So that's there because it works for both ways. It's both a good individual movies and a good franchise.
Our top three at the moment are Toy Story, The Godfather, and Trois Couleurs.
God,
Bleu.
we're such film nerds.
Yeah.
I don't know. Throw out some placings for this. I think this may
Is it better than The Evil Dead?
I like it more than Evil Dead. It's probably better as a franchise than Evil
We've had this discussion before, haven't we?
Have we?
I remember you saying I like it more than Evil Dead.
Well, I just don't like Evil Dead that much.
Okay, well, Evil Dead's days at 16 are numbered.
Okay, so do we reckon that maybe this should be another constant, though? The get constant, where it's like this marks a very specific train of thought is required for ranking this franchise.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, could we put it above Casino Royale, do you think?
So that's the Daniel Craig.
Yeah, and then so I think because it's like, and then if Forgetting Sarah Marshall would because you look at the ones above this, it's like Mad Max, Shrek. Oh, I guess Monsters Inc.'s there as well. Maybe it probably deserves to be above Monsters Inc.
Two films, neither of which I would say are better than Monsters Inc. But are better than Monsters University. So,
yeah, exactly.
So mathematically, yeah, man, put it there. Put it one above Monsters Inc.
And then so you're Forgetting Sarah Marshall, Monsters Inc. are kind of like the upper limit of where
two
like films can get,
go.
or where they can get based solely on the merits of the film. And then they're dragged down to that point by
not
You know,
really being a
not really
franchise.
not really counting kind of thing.
Although
Okay.
Monsters Inc. does have a TV show coming out in July, which is essentially acting as a third chapter in the story, which also brings me to I would be open to a Forgetting Sarah Marshall universe TV show, you know?
Wow.
Pick one of the many wonderful characters from both films as well, actually. I forgot
Well, let's just get crime scene of the crime.
Yeah. Sweet.
All right. Well, that's the end of the podcast. Although
We're only an hour
normally
and a
what we
half
do
in.
here, normally what we do here is announce what we're covering in the next fortnight, but we're not doing that this week, are we? AJ?
Okay, so not a very somewhat uninteresting reason why we're potentially having a guest on the next episode. And so usually we'd do franchise roulette and be like, this is what we're doing, but we're potentially having a guest on the next episode who wants to do a specific franchise. So we're probably going to do that, but they fun admin guys, they're yet to confirm. So we don't know if we're going to be doing what we're planning to do next franchise yet. What I think we'll do is as soon as it's confirmed, I will, okay, if it's confirmed before this episode drops in a few days, I will add a little thing in here now. And if it's still not confirmed but is confirmed after the release of this episode, I will post on socials, because I think people appreciate the chance to watch along with us or whatever. So I don't want to deny people that. But yeah, so this is we'll find out shortly. And yeah, so now all we've got left to do, Richard, is the post-credits scene, which we can't.
Which we need to record. And should we do a plug for the podcast as well?
Oh yeah. Do you want to do it? You did it last week. You were so good at it. You were so good at it. Yeah, you did it on the best of the franchise episode. You were so good at it, dude.
Oh,
I reckon you should start doing the plugs now instead of.
When I did the one that was like a riff on the Shawshank Redemption, and you were infuriated that I never do them, and then I did the best one.
That's right. That's good. All right. Well, what can you do? What can you bring us for this? I was thinking of doing a We've gotten big on TikTok recently, and I was thinking of doing a song with my flatmate, who can play music, of like weird, like essentially our call to action song. And if it turns out well, I might just put that at the end of each episode now instead of saying it every time.
Well, our call to action is this. Ring ring. No, I'm sorry. I'm not doing that. Check us out. You know, we're Cult Popture pretty much everywhere. We're on TikTok now. Check us out. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Cult Popture, Letterboxd. And if you want to email us, it's cultpopturemedia@gmail.com. And check us out wherever you find your podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, you just go find the subscribe button and hit subscribe,
or the like,
and then
or the
you'll
follow.
be treated to lots more.
Yeah. We have 2 YouTube channels as well. One, if this might be confusing because the one that TikTok links to is like our video essay channel, which is just called Cult Popture. But the reason people are liking the TikToks is because they're clips from the podcast, which are not going to find on the Cult Popture regular channel. The YouTube versions of the podcast, which you might be listening to right now, is of course on a channel called Cult Popture 2, which very confusingly is TOO, not the number 2. Something when I did, I was like, this is fun because we're a podcast about franchises and this is a sequel title trope, not realizing how hard that would be to explain to people. It is decisions away from being changed to a different title. Well, but even
Cult Popture again.
it should have been Cult Popture again. I should have made it Cult Popture again.
And then, if you go on it, it actually says Cult Popture Most Wanted.
Should I actually make it Cult Popture again? Is that a better title than Cult Popture 2? Let us know on the Discord. Get on the Discord, which you'll find a link to in the show notes, and let us know what you think the title of our second channel should be.
Thank you for listening to the episode. And here we are. It's the post-credit scene. We've got a list of questions sent in by patrons. And so you can send us questions or comments or anything you want us to discuss or do in these post-credit scenes for $5 a month on Patreon. And you also get access to a bonus podcast, which is very cool. And you get to vote on every secret franchise.
Wow, Richard, you've taken away the reins completely from me. I'm just going to leave it all to you now. I love it. I'm just sitting back in my little figurative bubble bath and listening to you do all. I
do. I would now. This feels like I know you're listening to this, but we've got a list of questions here. We don't currently have one from Dan Connell, who I know lives in Hawaii, who I know suggested for getting Sarah Marshall as a franchise because he lives in Hawaii. And so thank you, Dan, for suggesting that. And I would fucking love to answer one of your questions here. To make you feel included on the episode, but I can't. Instead, I just have to say this.
Dan's last post-credit scene question was, what's a franchise you are not looking forward to watching? So in a way, we gave him an 18-hour answer to that a couple of weeks ago. There you go. But we do have a question here from James Baston, who says, hey, do you guys do any good impressions? I do a fantastic Russell Brand and a fantastic David Thewlis. They're very distinguishable impressions. What is the crown jewel in your impression crown?
I don't know. I've said this before on the podcast, but I used to be really good. I used to really pride myself in my impressions, and then I stopped doing them for a long time, and then I found myself in a situation where I was required or thought it would be funny to do one, and then realizing that it's a muscle you need to keep working out, and then finding it so funny being bad at impressions, and so now I will quite often. Just embrace being bad at them. I don't know. I still do a few, and I think I still am all right at some of them. One thing I love doing, it's not so much a specific impression, but I love singing in a country voice. And I was doing it all day. I was driving for 8 hours today, and I did a lot of singing, so my voice is a little bit raspy, but that's one. I like to sing in a country voice.
What are you gonna do it?
AJ?
You're just going to say you can do it and not... I guess the question doesn't ask, can you do the impression? It just says, may you do the impression? It says, do you do any impressions? So we don't have to actually do the impressions, I guess.
Yeah. Is that funnier?
Sure
is that funnier not doing any of the impressions?
Well, I know you're uncomfortable with singing on the podcast, so I would never push you to do that.
Well, I don't know. It's just, I also if it's funny to say we can do these impressions and then not do them, I'm quite happy to do it because that's very funny to me.
Alrighty. Well, I won't do mine then. I think I've done this on the podcast somewhere before. My crown jewel impression is, of course, Hank Hill from King of the Hill. My Hank Hill knocks people down. People hear me do it and they are blown away by it. I can do a similarly good Bobby Hill from King of the Hill, but I don't think... I think, A, that's not as hard of a voice to do, and B, I'm not as good at it as I am at Hank Hill.
Yeah. But I think, as well, just if you listen to the podcast regularly, you'll hear us do impressions quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just, we're both natural storytellers, and we just dip into them quite often.
I love this. This is insane. Do you guys do any good impressions? And we're saying, yep. And that's it.
I love we can do one, and that's that we both have impressions of each other, but they're the same voice. Our just our making fun of each other, being oh yeah, I do, or yeah. It's that.
Richard. I'm Richard, and I'm going to subvert your expectations.
Oh, AJ, please.
And not fucking do any impressions.
Please let me do my impression. They're so good.
God, they're so good. I just want the chance to show you.
But to be fair, I think that is a you voice that came from like your high school or something, right? And then I've now adopted that as like the thing I associate with taking.
Do you
the
want
piss
to
out
know
of
the
someone.
full story of that voice?
Sure.
So that voice was a voice made up to make fun of a pair of twins at my school. A pair of twins who I don't think they're listening. They're all right, but they were kind of like your typical film nerds. And so we were friends with them, so we weren't making fun of them, you know, in a way like behind their back or whatever. And the characters that we would do that voice with sort of became very larger than life version of that twins. But that voice was actually created by the now ex-boyfriend of a friend of mine, Emily, who's on the podcast. And I said a friend of mine first because now I'm going to go ask her if she minds if we say that. Who fucking hated me. He hated me in high school. And it's a voice I stole from a person who hates me and has... and I've spread it to Richard multiple friend groups. I have multiple social circles, all who do this voice when they're playing like a loser character. And it's from this guy who hates me. And I know there are multiple people in my life who do this voice now. So funny, man. And they all get it as well. Like they use the same terminology. Like you talk a lot about like food and being my favorite sketch we'd do was this is in high school. This is so funny, and I'm just gonna this is gonna be the end of the post-credit sequence. It'd be like people think I'm like uptight, but I just don't care about shit. Like I'll go to the toilet and I'll take a shit, right, and I won't wipe my ass. I don't care. Like that's his interpretation of being a badass. Anyway, all right. Thanks, James. Thanks for the question.
Okay.